Many cry out about disasters to come, but people have been beaten other big threats in the past. Our next speaker, ETM Roger Carlson, will explain how the Bedouin Arabs beat one such threat. More importantly, he will describe wisdom that can be applied against today's threats. He will be presenting a level 3 speech on researching and presenting a topic in the presentation mastery pathway. His speech will be 8 to 10 minutes. Please welcome Roger, bringing you 4 pillars of wisdom for saving the world.
Fellow speech crafters, we humans have gotten ourselves in trouble a lot of times, frequently trouble of our own doing. But even though awful things can happen, on many occasions, somebody comes up with some really good ideas. They pull together all sorts of information, juggle it around, come up with something entirely new. And I'm going to give one example of that, and then going to apply the same thing to our worries about climate and oceans and food and energy, the whole panoply of things that we hear about now. They both have wisdom in the title. First one, 7 Pillars of Wisdom. It was a story from about a century ago. That's when a great war, we now call World War I, started. And in one corner of the war, it was big for the people there. They said, wait, the Turkish Empire is busy fighting a war in Europe. We Arabs can maybe become independent. So they said, we're going to be rebelling, which was maybe not the smartest thing to do, because the Turkish Empire was known for wiping out whole nations. And they had trains, they had cannons, they had machine guns, they had tens of thousands of soldiers to move with those trains. What did the Arabs have? A lot less. And as we went further south into the Arabic areas, they had much less. They were nomadic herders in areas of light grass, even patches of desert that they had to skirt around. They didn't have cannons. They didn't have railroads. They could be in serious trouble trying to go head to head. Well, fortunately for them, there was another empire. The British Empire was gathering troops in the Egypt area by the Suez Canal. They were eventually going to invade, but they didn't have the troops yet. So they sent some advisors. One was T. Lawrence, an archeologist, maybe a little eccentric, okay, maybe crazy. Anyway, he knew his Arabic. He could quote the Quran, the holy book for the Muslims, and he came to advise and provide little weapons, gold, help things get going. He studied the thing and he said, wait a minute, this military thing won't work for these guys. They have, if they try to defend anything, they'll just get creamed. But what can they do? Somebody comes to attack anywhere, they can spread out, run into the desert, and be nowhere until they gather back together and attack anywhere. Boom. And while they were doing that, they would keep the Turkish army busy here, there, shoot up a railway station, blow up a railroad train. So the Turks had to guard this place, that place, that place, and another place. It kept them busy. Meanwhile, the British army was getting set to attack elsewhere. So it worked out quite well. And eventually, those countries became independent because T. Lawrence had done this. And he even pulled something from the book of Proverbs, which has managed to make its way into 3 holy books. For the Jewish people, the Islamic people, and the Christians. So the book of Proverbs, it talks about 7 pillars of wisdom. So he said, this is 7 pillars of wisdom that you could apply. He'd thought of something entirely new. So maybe we could have some other pillars. I would call it 4 pillars of wisdom. And that would be things like, first, remain calm. Second, innovate. Next, follow the markets. And finally, keep your decency and goodness, because this is possibly the most important. And I'll get to these in detail. First, about remaining calm. In 1859, the first oil well was drilled in this country. In about 1861, there was the first forecast that we would run out of oil soon. This thing has been said for now a couple of centuries. Another 5 or 10 years, we're going to be out. Similarly, there was in the 1960s, early 70s, there's a worry that we would have a new ice age. So, an ice age, we're all going to be cold and die. What can we do? Well, we better do it fast or it might be too late. So, we should sprinkle a whole bunch of coal dust on the Arctic Ocean to melt that ice away to keep the ice from building up, and then we'll be safe from those glaciers. 20 years later, we were worried about things getting too hot. So frequently, we should wait just a little bit before we find out, before we rush out and get into serious issues. Next one about innovation. We can go way back in history. Set the Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody, and away we go. Way back when people hunted, that's what they were doing. That's all they did. Pretty soon they ran out of game as more and more people came on. So what did they do? They had to invent farming. Later on, the soils weren't quite as fertile. So in the late 1800s, there was a worry about that. Some people worked on it and they innovated. And they developed fixed nitrogen fertilizer. And they say, if we didn't have fixed nitrogen fertilizer, there would be half or less people that now exist, because we couldn't have fed them. But there was a need, and people were willing to pay, and it got invented. And that takes us to the next thing, markets. Follow the markets. A fellow named Diamandis, who invented the prize for first going into a first commercial flight going into orbit, said, if you want to make $1 billion, find something that 1 billion people will pay you $1 for. If you have a market, you can build it. And that's what you should be doing. Instead of frequently, some people say, people are just not going to be able to do it. We need some smart government people to run everything. Unfortunately, when they ran everything, things frequently went down in the hole. As somebody else said, Karl Marx was a city boy. Whenever socialists took over a country, they all had famines. It goes from Soviet Russia to China, to even the Shah of Iran tried having a white revolution, which would be socialist, and they were short on money. So, lesson learned, markets. And finally, to keep your life of doing things right. And we could talk about somebody in market, in the free market. A lady named Elizabeth Holmes had Theranos, a wonderful idea that was going to do some tests. One drop of blood could find 200 diseases or medical conditions. Great, except it didn't work. Sad to say it wasn't working, so she lied a little bit, and then she kept lying. And eventually, a lot of people were angry, a lot of people lost their money, a lot of people that had been working for her were threatened by her. It was, if she'd had a government ministry to do it, much worse things would happen. So that is the sort of things where those ideas can come together. We can find a number of ways for living right, doing markets, for innovating, and remaining calm. So that's my 4 methods of 4 pillars of wisdom. I had to put these together because I worked on these related things for about 8 years. And I wrote Saving the World Before Breakfast, A Better Green New Deal, Save the World Before Breakfast, The Earth Alone Can Save Us, and Saving the World Before Breakfast, Your Keys to Innovation and Invention. Took a long time to make big things short. These ideas could apply for thousands of places throughout the world. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.